Jalen, I remember 2 years ago, you predicted that this was going to become something that we would be dealing with, that there would be teams who would be declining invitations to go to the White House. In this particular case, that's not what happened. It should be reminded again, the Eagles were still going to go. Many of their players, perhaps most of them, were not going to go. Jalen, what is your response?
So I'm not proud to acknowledge that there will be players in the NFL and the NBA that continue to deny the opportunity to attend the White House visit. So in return, what the White House is going to do, as you guys just alluded to, they're going to try to get in front of it and disinvite teams. And here's what has happened. Throughout this presidential election, what I've learned, and the reason why I said this in November of 2016, was that I noticed that this presidential race basically divided our country in racial lines. And when I look at the sports dynamics and talking to multiple players, when you look at the NFL and the NBA, primarily black sports, and you look at Major League Baseball, more of an international sport, but when you talk about America's pastime, that has an undercurrent in the NHL. I would say that the reason why NBA, NFL players will deny this opportunity is because they have been allowed, and rightfully so, to be more socially and politically conscious. And start no further than what happened with Colin Kaepernick. Look no further than what happens with LeBron James and so many different athletes in those two sports. When things happen in our country, they've taken their political platforms and used them as athletes to create change, to be a beacon of and be beacons and voices of what are going on in the community. So I'm not surprised that this is taking place. It's unfortunate that it's happening, but this is only the beginning. I'm trying to tell you guys, it's going to be the exact same thing when the Golden State Warriors win the championship this year. They aren't going to the White House either, and it's unfortunate that we're at this place in our country.
Well, you recall that happened last time. Remember, they disinvited Steph Curry, and all of that went from there. There are so many things that jump to my mind when I consider this story. There are, and in the interest of time, I will choose just one. The president tweeted yesterday, and we put the tweet up if we could, please. The Eagles team was separate from his statement. This was a tweet. The Philadelphia Eagles football team was invited to the White House. Unfortunately, only a small number of players decided to come, and we canceled the event. Staying in the locker room for the playing of our national anthem is as disrespectful to our country as kneeling. Sorry. Now, let's make a couple of points with regard to that. The policy where players are now allowed to remain in the locker room rather than being out on the field during the playing of the national anthem was a policy that was unilaterally decided upon by ownership of the National Football League. We had the executive director of the NFL Players Association, Tamora Smith, live on this show, who told us the players had no say whatsoever in that decision and were not consulted. They were not told of the decision until after it had been made. The players were not consulted. And it was described by ownership everywhere they could release this news as a compromise. Many of us at the time asked the question, a compromise with who? The players weren't involved. It felt at the time like perhaps it was a compromise with the President of the United States. Well, the President of the United States is telling you, owners of the National Football League, this is not a compromise. And so now it is your job, if you own a National Football League team, if you are Bob McNair, if you are Jerry Jones, if you are any of the owners of the football teams of the National Football League, you have to respond to the President here. It's not the players' responsibility to respond to the president, to say staying in the locker room for the playing of the national anthem is as disrespectful to our country as kneeling. The players didn't say it was. You did. The owners of the National Football League teams said that that was a compromise. And if indeed it is a compromise, then it is the responsibility of ownership, not of the players, not of the Players Association, but of the owners of the NFL teams who made this decision unilaterally to say to the president, to respond directly to this and say, if our players choose to remain in the locker room during the playing of the national anthem, we do not consider that disrespectful to our country. It's your rule. It's your turn to own it. That, to me, of all the things I'd like to say here, is the first one that jumped to my mind.
And one more fact. With the Eagles, nobody protested by kneeling on that team, right? They had one player that stayed in the locker room throughout the season, but it was not a rule yet by the NFL. The only thing that happened was Malcolm Jenkins putting his fist up in the air and his team coming together. So I just want to specify that because I'm the first one to say when things are spun against the president, I get that. But him trying to spin this against the players, that's not fair.
And what's disheartening about the entire situation is that I feel like as though it's another attempt to just villainize NFL players in general, because what you're saying is there's a disagreement in the way that the president and the players actually view kneeling, and that's not necessarily the case. The players didn't say that, and we've seen it in the past where players have disagreed with presidents and not shown up to the actual White
Tom
House
Brady,
invitation.
Barack Obama.
Yeah, and then Matt Burke, I looked it up, 2013, Baltimore Ravens. He didn't agree with some of the things that Obama said at Planned
Specifically
Parenthood.
regarding to abortion,
Yes,
correct?
and he's
Tim
a
Thomas,
Catholic.
goaltender for the Boston Bruins, is
Yeah.
another, just off the top of the head.
It happens, you know what I mean? But we're continuing to villainize the NFL. We're not even back in the season again, and we're already having a polarizing topic going into what should be a celebration of a Super Bowl champion.